was to say that because he'd made each of the races, what they call races, separately, they therefore could have different attributes. So the white folk could be smarter than the black folks, and the yellow folks, and the brown folks, and the red folks. If you start with the premise that all life comes out of Africa, then all humans come out the same basic stock. And you have no basis then for presuming that one group of humans has any native intelligence any higher than any other group. So racism itself comes out of that mindset that Europeans have had.
Sounds like the biblical, you made me better. Why should I have to bow down to this one you done made now when you made me better?
That's a good point, because
it sounds like the same thing.
When Europeans were searching for religion that would be equivalent to other world religions, they had to find something that had some components they could work with. Christianity comes out of Judaism. Judaism has a basic statement in it. God chose the Hebrew people as his people. Now, technically, Hebrews, Jews if you will, have a different outlook on that. They don't see themselves technically as being any better than anybody else. They say they have a special responsibility to live in such a way as to show other people how to live. But that kernel of specialness was enough for Europeans to latch on to. And that, for them, they focus on the fact that we are chosen not to be better leaders, to show better. We are chosen because we are so much better innately ourselves. And so that's the basis of the thought that was operating at the time that Darwin was doing his work. The thought was white people were made special. Yeah, God made brown people and made black people and made yellow people and wasn't the red people, but he started running out of materials by the time they got to them.
Line on top.
Yeah, and that's a very important statement, because you got to have a lot of boldness to lie on God. But that's been the way that folks have operated throughout history. It comes out of these two different views of reality. Now, back in 150 AD, there was a guy named, who they called Ptolemy. And Ptolemy's findings were that the earth was a fixed, inert, immovable mass located at the center of the universe. And that all celestial bodies, including the sun and the fixed stars, revolved around the earth. It was a theory that appealed to human nature. No, it was a theory that appealed to European view of human nature. It fit with the casual observations that a person might want to make in the field. And second, it fed man's ego. It fed European man's ego, that he was the center of the universe. This is 150 AD now, Claudius Ptolemy. Now, the Ptolemies were Greeks who lived in Africa. The reference I looked at said he was Egyptian, and that's technically correct. He lived in Egypt. But the Ptolemies were Greeks who moved to Egypt when the Greeks just became totally enamored with Egypt. In fact, the Ptolemies were a ruling family. And when they discovered Egypt, they relocated the capital of the modern world from Rome to Alexandria in Egypt. And for 10 generations, they ruled from Africa, from Egypt. I think it was Ptolemy 10 fell out of grace. They exiled him by sending his butt back to Rome. Okay. They started dressing like Egyptians and doing everything like Egyptians. Now, Nicholas Copernicus comes along later on, 1473. He proposed that a rotating Earth revolving with other planets about a stationary central sun could account in a simpler way for the same observed phenomena of the daily rotation of the heavens, the annual movement of the sun through the ecliptic, and the periodic retrograde motion of the planets. So he was doing observations, and he said, no, it would make more sense to have all the planets and whatnot, including the Earth, revolve around the sun. Didn't have the sun and the planets revolving around the earth. He didn't get a whole lot of flack because probably at the time, a whole lot of folks were not aware of what he said. Then came along a guy we called Galileo Galilei, 1564, 1642. A little bit later, people had a little bit more information by the time. Galileo said, I do not feel obliged to believe that the same God who has endowed us with sense, reason, and intellect has intended us to forego their use. You know, he said God gave us the brain. I think he must want us to use them. Now, a little bit something. Now, there was something at the time called the Inquisition. The Inquisition was a permanent institution in the Catholic Church. In the Catholic Church. In the Catholic Church. Charged with the eradication of heresies. Unlike many other religions, i.e. Buddhism, Judaism, the Catholic Church has a hierarchical structure with a central bureaucracy. In other words, there is no Buddhist pope. There's no Jewish pope. They're organized in communities in the African style. The Roman Catholic Church is organized as a hierarchy in the European style. That's one of the shifts that took place. Religion comes out of Africa, New Christianity, 325 AD, the Council of Nicaea. They form what now becomes the Holy Roman Catholic Church, which has the kernels of the African religion, but in a European structured way of thinking. Okay? And so they formed the Inquisition because they said there's only one way to think. And anybody who thinks any differently than what we say has committed a heresy. Heresies from heresis, means sect or school of belief, were a problem for the church from the beginning. In the early centuries, there were Arians and Manichaeans. In the Middle Ages, there were Carathes and Waldenese. And in the Renaissance, there were the Hussites, Lutherans, Calvinists, and Rosicrucians. Efforts to suppress heresies were initially ad hoc, not organized. But in the Middle Ages, a permanent structure came into being to deal with the problem. In other words, in the Roman Catholic Church, every time a group rose up that said anything different than what the leaders of the church said, they said, you're a different sect, you're not allowed to be different, everything has to come up under our structure, and we got the right, since we're the ones who are all right, we got the right to do away with you. Now, in 1231, Pope Gregory IX published a decree that called, listen to stuff now, that called for life imprisonment with salutary penance for the heretic who had confessed and repented, and capital punishment for those who persisted. In other words, if you committed a heresy, if you belonged to any group other than what the Roman Catholic Church was saying, if you admitted you was wrong, and you will do penance, you got life imprisonment. Otherwise, they're going to kill you. So the church was officially in charge of killing. Okay? The secular authorities were to carry out the execution. In other words, they said the bishops and the cardinals don't have to do the actual killing themselves. Since they're in charge of the state, they have the state do it. Pope Gregory relieved the bishops and archbishops of the obligation and made it the duty of the Dominican order, through many inquisitions, though many inquisition members of other orders, through many, though many inquisitors were members of other orders or of the secular clergy. In other words, they created a separate order in the Catholic Church, the Dominicans, who were given the authority to carry out the executions. Sir?
I'm just wondering whether or not the fact that the Dominican order was chosen to do there, what effect has that had as we have come down through history in terms of how the Dominican order differs from other orders of the Catholic Church?
Well, quite frankly, I have not spent much time looking at that, but I would suspect that, like many other things in history, that's not talked about very much anymore. I would imagine there are a whole lot of folks who are now Dominicans who have no idea what the original reason for the Dominicans being formed was. Just as there are a whole lot of people who've now joined Planned Parenthood who don't know that Planned Parenthood came out of the eugenics movement to do away with lesser races.
Yeah.
Okay? So what happens in history is that when things fall out of favor, very often they're not talked about anymore. So I would imagine that there are many Dominicans who have no idea what the history of their order was. Come in.
Excuse me.
Yes.
That's what
Yes, come in, sir.
I've been looking around here for about 35 minutes.
Well, I'm glad you found us. Have a seat over here. Brother Leon Bonham, you've probably heard, you can have a seat right here. You've probably heard Brother Bonham on the Brother McCain's show. He's one of the most intelligent folks who calls in there. I'm glad he's with us today.
Thank you. But sometimes I don't think I'm that bright.
We're talking about the history, the times that Darwin grew up in, and the whole discovery of the process of how humans came into being. Now, the Inquisition, through the Roman Catholic Church, also had a judicial process. And here's what it was. The judge or inquisitor could bring suit against anyone. He's the super prosecutor. The accused had to testify against himself or herself and did not have the right to face or question his or her accuser. It was acceptable to take testimony from criminals, persons of bad reputation, excommunicated people, and other heretics themselves. Anybody want to talk about you can talk about you. The accused did not have the right to counsel, and blood relationships did not exempt one from the duty to testify against the accused. Sentences could not be appealed.
Oh my goodness. The exact opposite.
So if you think things are bad in the judicial process right now, they're a whole lot better now than they used to be. You testify against yourself, anybody can testify against you, couldn't even know who it was, no right to counsel, they can make your mama talk about you, and once they put the sentence on you, it could not be appealed. Pull that chair on back to Brother Carver. Now, so now you know about the process. Here are the sentences. The findings of the Inquisition were read before a large audience. The penitents abjured on their knees with one hand held on the Bible, with one hand on the Bible held by the Inquisitor. Penalties went from visits to churches, pilgrimage, and wearing the cross of infamy to imprisonment, usually for life, but sentences were often commuted. And if the accused would not abjure, death. Death was by burning at the stake. It was carried out by the secular authorities. In some serious cases, when the accused had died before proceedings could be instituted, his or her remains could be exhumed and burned. Death or life imprisonment was always accompanied by the confiscation of all the accused property. So of course now that made it even more interesting, because now if somebody wanted your stuff, they accuse you of being a heretic. Think about that. Think about a church being so vicious that if you died before they could do the job on you, they'd dig you up and burn you.
As bad as the guy going in the church and shoot the coffin.
Now, Galileo's belief in the Copernican system eventually got him into trouble with the Catholic Church. The Inquisition was a permanent institution in the Catholic Church charged with the eradication of heresies. A committee of consultants declared to the Inquisition that the Copernican proposition that the sun is the center of the universe was a heresy. These were the commission of church leaders. They were not scientists. They were just, like some of these folks pushing intelligent design. They're just people in the street. Because Galileo supported the Copernican system, he was warned by Cardinal Bellarmine under an order of Pope Paul V that he should not discuss or defend Copernican theories. In 1624, Galileo was assured by Pope Urban VIII that he could write about Copernican theory as long as he treated it as a mathematical proposition. However, with the printing of Galileo's book, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, Galileo was called to Rome in 1633 to face the Inquisition again. Galileo was found guilty of heresy for his dialogue and was sent to his home near Florence, where he was be under house arrest for the remainder of his life. In 1638, the Inquisition allowed Galileo to move to his home in Florence so he could be closer to his doctors. By that time, he was totally blind. In 1642, Galileo died at his home outside of Florence. So this is the basis of what was going on at the time that Darwin began to make his discoveries. This is part of the reason that Darwin planned to have this stuff published only after his death, knowing that even then they might dig him up and burn him. But that'd be preferable to being burned while you're still alive. Now, just to show you the other side of this, in the pyramid, the triangular area of each of the four sides of the pyramid equal the square of the vertical height. The added lengths of the four sides of the base bear to the vertical height the same proportion as the radius of a circle to the circumference. This indicates that the Egyptians understood the constant now called pi. It's inscribed right there in the pyramid. And as